Over this past week, there's been quite a bit of conversation around diversity hiring at major airlines. Because the last thing anyone wants to hear is that your pilot was chosen not because of their capabilities in the cockpit, but because of the color of their skin. And that's what's happening. Or gender. Elon Musk got criticized by civil rights groups because he said diversity is basically sacrificing, or these airlines are sacrificing safety for diversity. And safety is one way to put it, but the general idea is the best person for the job should be the one who gets the job. Well, I've got good news for all of you that were already concerned about flying, considering the failures of these major airlines, these major jets. Y'all know about the Boeing Max and its problems and the panel being ripped off the side of the plane mid-flight. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. Oh, man. You know, I have to wonder, what's the deeper conspiracy theory that we can come up with here? I'll give you one. My deep conspiracy theory is that the real effort here is to actually cause a crash, or just at the very least terrify people so nobody ever wants to fly again. Because when you're like, hey, we need air traffic controllers and people who can help run the system so planes don't crash. And then the FAA says, yes, but we do want to make sure we hire a bunch of people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. I'm like, yo, come on. It's like the one job you don't do that. Look, I'm going to be a nice guy. I go to the grocery store and I see someone who has special needs or severely intellectually or psychiatrically disabled, and they're helping to run a store. I'm not super worried about it. Whether or not someone can ring me up, bag my groceries, or properly stock things is not a matter of life and death. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. There are a lot of jobs that are available for people who are suffering severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities, but I don't think the FAA is one of them. To be fair, perhaps they're talking about logistical positions. Like someone may have the task of running like a courier or something. Maybe your job is, look, someone's got to relay files or objects, and that can be done by basically anybody. Don't just come out the gate and assume every single person or working at the FAA is an air traffic controller. But that being said, I'm sorry. Like, even if you're a janitor for the FAA, I think it's extremely, extremely important we don't bring in someone with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. I'm sorry. There's a reality here that we can't just say we're going to have diversity of mental capabilities. If you bring in someone who's a janitor and they don't quite understand, and someone who's like severely intellectually compromised or disabled, and they start mopping a computer because they don't understand, like that, I'm sorry. There's this meme story, I don't know if it's true, the military has an IQ threshold. That it's like if your IQ is below like 75 or 70, I think it's 77 maybe, I don't know, you guys probably know better than me, that they will not allow you to enlist because they said after numerous studies, they found that there is no task you could successfully complete. Like literally carrying boxes can't be done if your IQ is that low. Someone should have a word with Forrest Gump. The New York Post reports, the Federal Aviation Administration is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. They include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism. Okay, I'll just pause right here. Listen, my friend, if you are deaf, you're not stupid. You can do the job. Meritocracy has nothing to do with there. But if you're deaf and you say you want to be an audio engineer, I'm sorry, diversity be damned. Okay, I need someone who can make a song, and if you can't hear, you can't make a song. Vision impairments? Okay, that's fantastic. In fact, even if you are blind, there's a lot you can still do. I'm not going to ask you to be a pro athlete, but there are pro athletics you can do still as a blind person. And so that's not, actually completely correct. If you're deaf, you probably can still play like, Major League Football or something, but audio commands will likely give someone else a major advantage. If you're blind, you can't play football. But I'm sure there are athletics you can do. So, okay, fair point. I'm sure there's a job people who are deaf and blind can do at the FAA. Missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis. There are jobs that you can do. I really mean it. complete paralysis, like from the neck down, there are jobs you can do. I'm not trying to be cute either. Voice activated commands. There's the strategy stuff, a consultation. Your brain is you. You know what I mean? And epilepsy, I think is fine too. You give someone medication. But the severe intellectual disability and psychiatric disability portion has me really concerned. I don't dwarfism. It's a person is short. I don't care about that. Like, you're fine. You can have any job you want. I mean, you're not going to be playing in the NBA because, diversity doesn't go that far. Ask Mark Cuban. The initiative is part of the FAA's Diversity and Inclusion Hiring Plan, which claims diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel across our nation and beyond. The FAA's website shows the agency's guidelines on diversity hiring were last updated on March 23, 2022. The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg's Department of Transportation, is a government agency charged with regulating civil aviation and employs roughly 45,000 people. Oh boy! All eyes have been on the FAA and the airline industry in recent days after a plug door on a Boeing 737 MAX 9 blew out. I've got breaking news for you, my friends. Some internal secrets. We book guests all the time. We rely on air travel to bring people out to the Timcast IRL studio. We do not do remote interviews. They are not fun. We've never done a remote interview, and we won't. We actually have never even developed a system to do a remote interview. We want people in real life. That's why we call it in real life, IRL. We had a guest recently have their flight canceled, and the notification we got was that they were grounding some of these MAX 9 planes, and without the plane, sorry, they had to do a maintenance review on a bunch of these planes. If they found bolts were loose on all of these doors, and a door got blown off. I think I can tell you what's happening. This is all starting to happen in the era of diversity, and I really do think the priority has been overwhelmingly feel-good ideology garbage instead of who can do the job. The argument made by these leftists is that, of course, white men are going to be best at the job because they're the ones who get to go to the prestigious universities. They genuinely believe that if we just take people from anywhere, put them in the universities, put them in these programs, they can do all of these same things as well. Maybe, to a certain degree, that's true, but they go way overboard with it. The right thing to do would be make sure the opportunity exists for those that have the capabilities and let the change come. That means you're going to have overwhelmingly white males flying planes. But the number of women and minorities, or I should say non-white people who are flying planes and working in these industries is growing. Let it grow organically as we heal. Instead, what they do is they say, no, we should mandate this. So you end up with a really great pilot not getting the job and a poorer pilot getting the job because of their diversity quotas. Mark Cuban came out and he was saying, diversity just means finding the right person and not overlooking a group. No, dude. You can say that as the CEO, but I'm going to tell you guys the best example I've seen of institutional breakdown and or hierarchical breakdown. It was a better way to call it. You got a guy who runs a company. He's a smart guy. Mark Cuban's a smart guy. I don't agree with him on a lot of politics stuff. But Mark Cuban understands the importance of, look, if you only look for white people for a job, you're losing on a lot of talent. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So equal opportunity matters. And that makes sense to him. But the people underneath him, they got no idea what he's talking about. So here's the best example. Last week, I said I would like a cold brew with heavy cream from Starbucks. I know we don't have any Cast Brew out here. It is what it is. Castbrew.com. And I received a cold brew with cream. That's not heavy cream. Heavy cream is different. And I laughed because I was like, it's fine. I don't care. I made a joke. I was like, that's it. The show's canceled. And everyone laughs. Haha, I'm so funny. But my point was, heavy cream is a specific thing to people who understand the difference between cream and heavy cream. And although it is a very simple analogy, the point is this. I say to someone, get me a coffee. They say, okay, you got it. They then say, hey, can you go run out and grab coffees? By the time the communication through that game of telephone, the person who's at the store just says, I need a coffee with cream. Because the word heavy is meaningless to them. They don't understand what heavy cream is. This is the breakdown with DEI stuff. Mark Cuban may have good intentions and genuinely believe he's talking about we're going to hire from any available pool. What happens then is you go down to the lower level of employees and they're like, boss says he wants to hire black people. Okay, well, that's a gross misunderstanding of what the actual idea was supposed to be, but that's what happens. And then when you add economic incentives, like we saw this, there was one major airline that had a program that paid bonuses if they hired more diverse people. Well, now ain't nobody cares. Because you go to a guy who doesn't care about his job all that much and is like, look, it's my job to recruit people. and I get paid an extra 20 grand a year if those people aren't white, they're not going to care if they're hiring the best or the worst people. They're going to care if they're hiring the non-whitest people. And that's the institutional breakdown. And don't get me wrong, it's also the Mott and Bailey. When they come out and they give you the false argument of, we're just trying to find the best people, or the first argument is, we don't want to hire white people, and then when you argue against it, they say, no, we're just trying to hire the best. That's the Mott and Bailey trick. Mark Cuban falls for it, of course. But wait, my friends, there's more. You see, we have this tweet from Libs of TikTok. CEO of United says he takes race and gender into account when hiring and laments there's too many white males in the airline industry. A lot of people are warning right now that Wall Street Silver says right here, when a plane load of people die because of diversity, equity, and inclusion, these videos are going to make for great evidence in court during the lawsuits. Absolutely. That's true. But I got to stop you right there, my friend. Day, D-E-I, that means God. Don't use D-E-I. Say D-I-E. Diversity, inclusivity, and equity. Die. It's the die cult. I like die over day, and it's funny that they use day because it's, what is it? D-E-I, it's like the Latin root for God, right? I'm gonna fact check this right here. Yeah, it's the genitive singular of deus, the Latin word for God or deity. Don't say that. Language matters. Say die. People are going to die because of die. Makes sense, doesn't it? So here's a guy being interviewed on HBO, the CEO of United, talking about how, they're gonna get to that point where they have a certain number of non-white people working for their company. We have this story from the Wall Street Journal. Quote, "This has been going on for years inside Boeing's manufacturing mess." Someone told me something recently that I don't know if it's true. I'm not a doctor. They said that when someone has cancer, if they fast, what'll happen is the body will start breaking things down. It's an interesting thought. I think there's probably a lot wrong with the idea, but far be it for me to understand. Someone said, let's say like you're starving, your body starts eating itself, right? So if you have cancer, the first thing that goes is the cancer cells. They get eaten first. And my response was kind of like, yeah, but what if the cancer just starts eating the muscles around it to grow the cancer? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. You talk to a doctor about this, but it's an interesting concept. Because I started thinking about what that means for a civilization. And I've long thought that we've gotten to this point where we are so fat and happy. With so much resource and abundance, we are no longer trapped within the confines of desperate survival. So a lot of the traditional values that we have emerge due to the requirements in order to survive. There's this one theory about why white people are like, well, it depends on who you ask, say greedy or industrious, pick your term. And they say it's because when you had white people moving to the north in Europe, they started encountering more and more winter. And those who seek to survive in winter must work nonstop throughout the summer and then work nonstop throughout the winter to survive the harsh winter. So the way it goes is, if the summer rolls around and you eat in abundance all the fruit and vegetables that just grow aplenty and do nothing else, winter rolls around, you freeze to death and starve. There's no food in the winter. So those that were able to survive in the winter would have to forage, plant, farm, and store and figure out means of preservation of food so that come winter, they'd have food available. So, jerked meat, for instance, beer, for instance. And then in the winter, they'd have food stores, wheat and grain readily available and stored properly in a cool basement. For people who lived in the more Mediterranean areas, it's really interesting because you see like siesta in Spain. You have people who take they go to nap during the middle of the day. Granted, they stay up later, their day is just split differently. But the argument was that in the Mediterranean area, where it was typically just always warm because of the ocean currents, you didn't have to struggle for winter. So you were able to just live all year round with food constantly, and growing season varies between different crops or whatever. Now, some people have said this idea is discredited, but I think it does make sense. I don't know if it does or doesn't. What I can say is that survival plays a role in whether or not people have certain behaviors. If it's freezing out, it's the ant and the grasshopper story. If it's freezing out and there's somebody refusing to do work, they're going to freeze to death. Just like sitting there laying around being like, well, I'm cold, but I don't want to do anything. Okay, well, then you freeze. Those who want to survive are constantly struggling and fighting and working to survive. What happens when every home is heated, every home is cooled, every food refrigerated, and every belly full? There's no more evolutionary pressure on individuals to retain these certain behaviors. In fact, those that don't want to work survive. Those that don't want to work plead to the government and get welfare benefits and then get food and do nothing. These people, no longer facing any pressures, ask everyone else, why does anybody work at all? And that's what we're seeing. Young people say food should just be free. Well, food is relatively free for a lot of people, but the work still has to be done. And the more that we've separated ourselves from the threats of death and, from survival mechanisms, we now just live because everything's so comfortable, then people who normally would not survive, lazy, entitled, etc., they do. And they vote. And the ideas they carry about not working become pervasive as well. I don't think this is even up for dispute. This is basic fact. Someone who is lazy, and you have two tribes of people. One chieftain says, nobody should work. The other tribe says, we must work hard. Who survives and expands and grows in the long run? The ones that don't want to work, they go hungry. The ones that work really, really hard have abundance. Guess what? We love each other. Humans tend to love each other, so we'll protect those. We don't want anyone to die. So the people who normally don't want to work may not rise to the same levels of power, but their ideas become more persistent. Eventually, let's say you have 100 people who all work hard, and there's a struggle to grow the population because of harsh winters and, they invent technologies. Now, everyone survives. That 100 people of hard, studious individuals, industrious individuals, grow their population. The people who normally would not survive, and now you have 50 people who are kind of lazy and 100 people who are industrious. 50 new young people who grew up in a world in abundance and don't know what you need to do to work hard. Okay, well, those 50 still get outvoted. Another generation goes by, and now it's 50-50. You've got 100 industrious people, but 100 lazy people. And the lazy people are voting, I don't want to work, you do it. Then another generation goes by. You've got 150 lazy people and 100 people who are industrious, and now the lazy people are voting for laziness, and the system breaks. It was the idea I thought about what someone was saying about cancer. Again, I don't know that that's true. There's probably so much wrong with that because cancer is not just like people. But sociologically and politically, I get it. It seems to make sense, right? If we as a society protect people who refuse to work, those ideas will flourish. It's like idiocracy. Lazy, the stupidest people just bred the most, and the smartest people were not, and then 500 years later, everyone's really dumb. But think about what then happens to a society like that. Idiocracy, too, would be really interesting. It would be, 500 years after this, society would have rebounded. Why? Well, it's like they say. Hard times make strong men make good times make weak men make hard times. So after idiocracy, if you go another 500 years, all the stupid people struggled to survive. They didn't know how to grow crops. You had to have seen the movie, right? It's a brilliant movie. But with all their technology keeping them alive, the economy was collapsing. They couldn't grow crops. They were watering their crops with Gatorade, basically. They called it Brondo. And he's like, what is Gatorade? Yeah, they were salting the earth, making it impossible for things to grow. And they were going to run out of food and die eventually. So the future of idiocracy, 500 years from then, is all the stupid people died. The smarter people had to struggle and figure things out, and they rebuilt everything in a different way. That's what I see going on right now with these airlines. We are victims of our own abundance. Struggle is a component of human life, and we cannot all just live comfortably. Otherwise, what you get? You get this. It feels good to say, we're going to make everyone have a chance to play the game. Participation trophy generation. That's where we're at right now, right? Basically, the way it goes is it's rather simple. You get a participation trophy just for being here. And everyone just feels good. But some people shouldn't be allowed to play the game. I'm sorry. If you don't have arms, I don't know that you'll be able to play basketball at the same level. I mean no disrespect to those who are missing their arms. Your human dignity remains intact. But your capability to play high-level NBA, not there. Sorry. This is not an attempt to be mean. But imagine if we truly embraced this diversity feelings stuff wide scale. It's only a matter of time before the NBA puts a rule in place saying you've got to have X amount of non-white and white. Well, probably they wouldn't say white, but X amount of people on the team not white. X amount of people must be female. X amount of people must be people with disabilities. And then the NBA is going to be, some tall athletic guys and tall, athletic women who can't dunk, and some dudes, in wheelchairs or something. And I'm not trying to be mean to anybody. I'm saying if the rules we create in sporting are arbitrary, like they're doing to women's sports now, and I predicted this one. We're halfway there. Yo, guys, go back and watch my videos from 2018, 2017. I said it's only a matter of time before they change the rules and start putting diversity and stuff into major league sports. It's starting with women's sports, where they're saying if you identify as a woman, you can play in a women's sports team. How long until they say it is unfair that they only ever pick men? And if they want diversity, like they said to this United CEO, right? How many of the people in your C-suite are women and people of color? And it's like, oh, we have 3 women. Why not 50-50? Okay. Same thing for basketball or football. How come there's no women playing football? Because of the rules, right? No. Because only the best players make it. You find me like a strong, a woman who can throw the football the way a guy can, she'll make the team. Sometimes there have been women who have tried to be kickers because they can kick, but they never seem to make it. There was one, I think it was a college, was it a high school or I think it was a high school football team. All the dudes were crying because this is funny. Because they were like, we're going to have the first female on the team. And she's a kicker. And then she just failed miserably. And they're like, are we losing? It is going to happen. Mark my words. In the meantime, your plane may fall out of the sky. So I hope you enjoy it, diversity people. I hope it was all worth it. But of course, they'll make excuses for it. My ultimate point here is this. In the end, what happens is the people who don't know how to survive will vote for things that break the system, and those who know how to survive will, and the system will recover eventually. Good luck out there. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. on the channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.